Today, the DMV MR2 group has arranged for a dyno day at Cam's Coatings and Performance. We are going to see a wide variety of builds from 2GRs to 3SGTEs, 2ZZs, and my very own 2AR powered MR2 Spider. First up is a built Gen 4, I believe, 3SGTE. He ended up putting down a healthy 387 wheel horsepower with 359 pound-feet of torque, but he had even higher expectations. After some discussion, we figured out that it might have been because he was running 93 instead of E85. Next, we had a Frankenstein Motorworks 2GR kit with the ATS 4-inch FXE intake manifold setup recently added. But instead of a gain, he saw a small drop from 280 wheel horsepower on the same dyno a year ago, down to 273 wheel horsepower and 236 foot-pounds. Now, most importantly, no bias, is my very own Frankenstein Motorworks 2AR swap. This is a 2.5-liter dual VVTi 4-cylinder from a Toyota RAV4. It's advertised to make 195 wheel horsepower in the swap setup with a chambered muffler and a balance shaft delete, although I did not delete my balance shafts. So it made 186, which is a little lower than I was hoping for, but everyone has gotten a lower number than they were hoping for so far. And it's 60 wheel horsepower more than my 1ZZ still, but you can tell the power band transformed the car just by driving it. We just didn't end up with a big number for YouTube, which is fine. Here we've got another 3SGTE build with a classic tofu delivery livery. The noodle pun license is amazing too.
Those little puffs are making me nervous.
It made 272 just like Mike's 2GR, but with a very different power curve. Next up is another Frankenstein Motorworks 2GR swap. He's really taken over the MR2 community lately. The owner, Willie, has some interesting future plans for his 2GR, but in the meantime, listen to this very free-flowing exhaust bust all of our eardrums. This one did not have the ATS intake setup and managed to make 284 wheel horsepower and 248 foot-pounds of torque.
So if I ever beat you, then you suck. I'm just saying.
I got you a better mountain. I didn't have my whole shifter.
Although I imagine that's mostly due to the exhaust. Now it's time for the twin Spider with a 2ZZ to compare to my 2AR dyno numbers. Nigel and I replaced his 2ZZ after the oil pump gear exploded. Check out that video in the card above. I was pretty shocked by 162 wheel horsepower. I thought it would be a lot closer to my 2AR. Give me a second to touch on how pretty much everyone, except Willie, was disappointed with their power today.
154 IS.
Yeah.
That's a little warm.
So it was definitely not ideal conditions for our mid-engine cars. Normally at a dyno they blow a giant fan into your radiator, but in our cars, the giant fan that blows into the radiator is nowhere near the engine bay. So the engine bays can heat soak pretty bad, and that might give you a lower number. This next car has some sort of 3SGTE swap, I'm not sure which gen. If you can tell, leave a comment. and at 220 some wheel horsepower, that's a very healthy number for a relatively stock 3S GT. To complete the NA 4-cylinder shootout against the 2ZZ and 2AR, this Civic Si has a Hondata or similar tuning device and a K20 Z3, the best of the USDM K20 motors. On its first run, it put down 193.
Woo! Goddamn!
Which is freaking fast. Yep, it definitely won on peak power here.
So here you can see the 1ZZ dyno from a stock MR2 Spider with a HKS exhaust on it. So we get this nice, very flat, predictable linear power curve, which is great for the average person who's learning how to drive a mid-engine car. The most common upgrade for a 1ZZ is a 2ZZ, because they're very similar engines, and the swap is not very difficult and relatively less expensive than the other two options we're about to get into. You can see here we actually lose some torque and therefore some power down below about 4,000 RPM, where both engines feel like they have absolutely nothing to give anyway. We're a good 20 foot-pounds and 10 horsepower down below 3,000 RPM. I'm going to hypothesize that this gap in power is due to the 2ZZ not having ASIS. ASIS is a dual-length intake runner setup that the 1ZZ has, which allows it to resonate at two different target frequencies, one at low RPM and one at high RPM. Here we can see lift activates, and the engines are pretty much comparable. You get a really strong kick, which is actually a sign that your lift point should be somewhere back here. And then the 2ZZ just continues to breathe kind of linearly where the 1ZZ falls off. And you could go even further if you wanted to, and some of the ECUs do allow you to do that. 2ZZ does respond really well to aftermarket ECUs. I've seen 2ZZs put down 170, 180 wheel horsepower with just a tune. Nigel's 2ZZ MR2 here is a little hamstrung by that stock ECU. So now we're going to go on to everyone's favorite, the K20. You can see why people say the K20 is so much better than the 2ZZ, because it just has a fat little power band gain everywhere, and it just gets bigger and bigger as you get to the peak horsepower number. So as you can see, it's really similar to a 2ZZ actually, except it has more displacement and it's just a straight upgrade everywhere. This K20 isn't even optimally configured, but neither are any of these other engines. They all have pretty much the minimal amount done to them. And finally, we're going to talk about the 2AR, which is the engine that I chose. As you can see, it's a very, very different engine than the 2ZZ and the K20. It's actually much more similar to a 1ZZ in that regard. If you look at this power curve, it's pretty linear, and it rolls off a little earlier than the 1ZZ. One thing you'll note if we compare the K20 and the 2AR is that the 2AR has a much fatter power band down low. If for some reason you cannot solve this with gearing. Now obviously, if you gear the K20 lower, then you're going to be winning everywhere. You're just going to be shifting more often. But if you're in a different type of event like autocross, where a really, really fat power band is pretty beneficial because you're going to be spending your time in pretty much anywhere on the rev range, then you might find that you like the 2AR. The other thing is, if you're just daily driving this thing, I really find this fat gap in the power to be pretty nice. If you're cruising at 3,000 RPM, or if you're at 4,000 RPM and you're about to roll on in either vehicle, I mean, that is a 45 horsepower gap at 4K. Now, of course, you could just say, well, 4K in the 2AR is roughly equivalent to 5,700 RPM. And that's fair. Easily gear your K20 so that 4,000 RPM in the 2AR is the same speed as 5,700 RPM in your K20, but that will cause you to have very short gearing. Now, neither of these configurations are optimized anyway. A couple grand in mods for these motors, and you're going to be able to gain some 30, 40 or more horsepower most likely. So personally, I don't think you can go wrong with either the K20 or the 2AR. I like both of them. I just chose to go with the 2AR because I wanted Toyota stuff in my MR2, and I really like the support that Frankenstein Motorworks gives. The Discord server is full of a lot of really smart people I like talking to, so that's pretty much it. Choose whichever motor you like the best. Thanks for watching.